Hey, good morning, boys and girls. Who wasn't here yesterday? That's not many of you. That's not many of you that I need to forgive for going to hear Stacy Croft instead of me. I didn't tell you much about me yesterday, though you probably picked up on a lot of things about me. I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, and I told you I went to Ole Miss and then I went to RTS, and I wanted to be a psychologist, and there were two at that point. Early 80s, there were only 2 doctoral programs in psychology on the planet known as Earth that were from a Christian perspective, and they were 45 minutes away from one another, depending on traffic. They were Rosemead and Fuller, and so I was very blessed to get to go to Rosemead, which was a very strong clinical program, which is kind of where I learned to think in the model I've been given to y'all now. I've been married 31 years to a woman I met at Ole Miss in RUF. I have 3 daughters, 27, 25, and 21, pushing 22. And as I mentioned to you, we're empty nesters. My practice for 25 years in Jackson, I basically have an outpatient practice. I have, I do what you think I would do. I have a couch and a pipe and a sweater, and, You don't have to lay down on the couch, though. But you do have to tell me about your mother, the old cliche. And I do sort of, I'm kind of the psychological version of the old family doctor. I fix broken bones and, deliver babies and cure the common cold. I work with depression, anxiety, marriage issues. I do parent consultation with younger children. And as I told you yesterday, I do sort of a musical chairs kind of approach to my work with teenagers, just because I think integrating the parents into the work is that important. Anyway, that's what I do all day long, and I do conferences like this, or I do go to churches and do a parenting conference or a marriage conference or whatever like that. That's almost recreational for me to, go out of town, and I love this kind of interaction. This is the same content in some ways that I do therapy, but there's so much more playfulness and interaction, and so that's a fun thing for me too. Avocationally, my favorite things to do is I've always been a sailor. I like to sail, and now I windsurf in Jackson. That's something really important to me, and I like to cook. Those are kind of my 2 passions that aren't psychology. Anyway, that's a little bit more about me. Who's this guy up here talking to you? For those of you who weren't here yesterday, let me get you caught up just a little bit. What we're doing is trying to understand the dynamics of adolescence by understanding the dynamics of how human character and how the human heart works. My job, in a sense, is creating an operationalization of the heart. In other words, we can talk about the heart. What does that mean? What does that look like? What goes wrong with it? What does it need? How do you hurt it? How do you fix it? We talk about sin. What is sin? What are the dynamics of sin? What are the parts of sin that make us want it? When we're wounded emotionally, how do we fix that? When we want to be more Christ-like, what does that look like relationally as I try to put that together and approach that proactively? That's a lot of what I try to do. That's what I think a Christian psychologist does, is sort of, in a sense, name the animals in the field of the heart, in the field of fallen people. My goal with you is to kind of give you A, an overview of that, B, an understanding of how adolescents work, and today we're going to talk more about how to actually intervene one-on-one and talk about more specific issues. But one of the things we talked about yesterday was why one-on-one individual counseling is important. We said basically that the place you learn, the place you're wounded, the place you become who you are is in the context of relationship. The things that you feel emotionally aren't things that someone taught you in your head. The things you feel emotionally that drive your life or hold you back are things that you experienced in a relationship. They're things that you didn't learn intellectually, you learned them in a relationship. Somebody didn't say to you, son, you really don't matter when you mess up. Here's a book about that. What probably happened is, you broke your dad's flashlight on the camping trip and he refused to speak to you the rest of the trip. And there was this experience where you just go, oh, that's what happens when you mess up. You learned that relationally. So how do you fix it? Well, you can't go back and fix a relational experience that affected you with new information. Here's a book on how you don't need to feel that way anymore. The only way you fix a relational thing is in a relationship. And that's what one-on-one is. That's what counseling is. We talked about my grid for understanding the heart. We talked about 4 areas that are always happening in the human heart. We talked about attachment, which is about the ability to be close. Do I have the ability to engage other people in relationship, to let you know me, to be known by you, to share my heart, to remember you love me even if you don't, text me back? And the application to God is abiding and oneness with Him or with one another, that connected piece. Can we do that? A lot of the problems that we have in life, and a lot of the problems you'll see in the lives of your teenagers aren't just problems. All that fruit that they might bring to you, those symptoms or those problems are going to relate back to character problems here. One of them is attachment. Another one is we call boundaries. And that is, I also need the ability to be separate. Can I say no? Can I be me? Can I be different from you? Who am I vis-a-vis you? Am I someone you can just roll over and I'll just follow along? Or can I kind of stand up and stay true to what I believe? Can I be my own identity? And obviously that's a big deal for adolescents because they're asking, who am I? Thirdly, we make sense of issues of good and bad. Like, how do I deal with shame? How do I deal with failure? Am I one of those people who has to be perfectionistic or else I feel really like ashamed and awful? You'll hate my guts. You'll think bad of me. Or can I remain poised during my failure or my sinfulness or my brokenness and still know I'm loved? One of the things we need here is a sense that I know I am loved even if I'm fallen. And fourthly, we need to have the ability as adults who function well to be both an agent in authority. Can I be proactive versus passive? And yet I also need to be able to submit, like to bend the knee to authority. So those I've just called my 4 food groups. Those are the basics of character. They're the basics of the image of God. God calls this abiding in love. He calls this let your yes be yes and your no be no. He calls it stewardship. This is about humility, forgiveness, getting the beam out of your own eye. This is about being like the centurion who knows the structure of the authority of the universe. These are the basics for the way God calls us to be as well. The next thing we did yesterday was we applied that to adolescents. They have a unique perspective in each of these, and we got about halfway through it, and that's where we're going to pick up. We talked about how if you want to help an adolescent understand attachment, you need to learn to hear them. Rather than jumping to the parental, that's ridiculous kind of mode. If they say, oh my gosh, I hate my sister. A wise person would at least let them talk about that before you tell them, sorry, you still got to be nice to her. Okay? We let their opinions matter. Boundaries, we had a lot of issues about boundaries with teens. One is that they're going to be more invested in their peers and actually in other third-party relationships besides their parents. And that's a big role that y'all can play in ministry, is you aren't a parent, but you're safe. We said that they need to start making choices that are kind of individuated and for that not to scare you. Somebody made a good point to me afterwards to make a distinction between a teenager who's individuating and says, I disagree, or I want to listen to music that's different from you, or I don't like what we're having for supper, versus rebellion. Individuation is a healthy movement toward I'm a different person than you. That's how a teenager starts working toward adulthood. Rebellion is a power struggle. Rebellion is an angry expression of I want to win over you. And that's a whole nother ballgame. We can talk about it if you want, but it was a good distinction somebody made. We talked about how discipline with an adolescent starts to sound more like real life. Not go upstairs and you do your homework right now, young man, but more so, we're going to be checking your grades, at the end of every week, and if you have more than 1 C, you're grounded for that weekend. You choose. I'm not going to be on your case to make you study. You need to start thinking like an adult and reaping consequences of that. All right, that's as far as we got. Where we're going to pick up now is making sense of helping an adolescent with issues of suffering, goodness, and badness in the world. I want to look at this one and then the authority agency issue. And then we're going to talk about how you actually intervene, what it looks like to sit down and talk to a teen, trying to engage them with issues they deal with. Any questions so far about any of the things we talked about yesterday? My quick little review there. Yes, ma'am.
What did you say the biblical reference for bad was?
You mean the parallel in the image of God?
Yeah.
Forgiveness, humility. Why do you call me good? Only our Father in heaven is good. Getting the beam out of your own eye. The ungrateful servant. You've been given much. Loves much. Big theme in the Bible. Though your sins be as scarlet, they'll be as white as snow. All right. Two different places that we deal with bad. Just for the sake of our discussion, we could get more specific, but two different places. One is we need to deal with yuck in the world, suffering. Like things are hard for teenagers. They're going to be talking to you about things that feel bad to them. They really tried out for cheerleader and they didn't make it. Somebody really hurt them. One of their friends is gossiping about them. They forgot their lines in the play and they're completely humiliated. They're flunking out of school. They're telling you about how mean their dad is. There's painful stuff in their lives. What do they need regarding that? Well, let's talk about that. Our culture is interesting in that we are, as a culture, have learned to be afraid of children suffering in any way. We have a culture that, of parents especially, who have so many resources to protect our children, that they've spent all their time protecting their children. We have so many resources to help our kids. All we do is help our kids. And so there's a sense in which kids don't have a lot of a sense nowadays of how to learn to face difficulty and face pain. And one of the things that is your job, if you're a counselor or a mentor to a child who's dealing with loss or sadness, is to remember this. The goal in life with young people as well as with older people is not to protect them from suffering, but to help them learn to suffer well. Basic principle I want you to learn regarding your own children, regarding the people in your ministry. Pain itself does not harm children. Loss itself does not harm children. Sorrow itself does not harm children. Unresolved pain harms children. Unresolved loss harms children. What I hear in my office is, well, my dad is not this. Well, my dad was an alcoholic, and so I'm all messed up. What I hear in my office is, well, my dad's an alcoholic and no one ever talked about it. Get it? In other words, part of life and part of how we help kids grow is to teach them how to walk into suffering in the context of love and metabolize it and survive it, and it makes them become stronger in the context of love. It's unavoidable. And so in this fallen world, what we learn to do with kids is not like run around defending and protecting and keeping them from suffering, but walking into it with them. That's going to become a real theme today, is with. Besides, unresolved pain will harm us. Pain I can't ever talk about will harm us. Pain that I'm not in relationship with another person will harm us. But resolved pain will really help me grow. I mean, rejoice when you encounter various trials. Why? Knowing that will produce endurance and all these fruits. I mean, Paul's all about this. That when we face pain in the context of love, it makes us grow. Anybody ever heard of Wolff's Law in medicine? Is there a doctor in the house? Yeah, Daryl, you know Wolff's Law? Remember that one?
Forget it.
All right, Wolff's Law is basically that bone density is directly affected by the amount of stress put on it. It's the reason they have to have those exercise machines in the space shuttle. Because if you live in zero gravity and you don't stress your bones start to get hollow and like like that peanut brittle candy that you could just break. You have to stress a bone to make it strong. And likewise, like physicians are starting to really condemn those antibacterial goos, that we rub on our kids' hands all the time, because we're raising a generation of kids who don't have an immune system because they don't have any germs. And what they're saying is, you need to let kids encounter difficulty. You need to let kids encounter germs. That's the only way they build an immune system. It's like they need to eat the gum from under the table at Applebee's. It's like this is part of growing up. So you take those metaphors, Wolf's Law and the gum under Applebee's, and you see that's the same principle for growth. As a therapist, my job is not to make people feel better. My job is to help them learn to feel sorrow well. Part of the reason we have symptoms is because this is a world full of sorrow, and people hurt us and there's pain, and instead of feeling sadness, which is a healthy, godly emotion, maybe next to gratitude, the most godly emotion is sadness, we want to do something to not feel that. So I'm going to go use a substance. Or what you said made me sad, so I'm going to yell at you. Or I don't want to feel any of those sad feelings, so I'm going to cut myself off from my feelings, which results in depression. Or I'm so afraid I'll have to feel some sadness that I'm anxious all the time and I'm worried and I'm thinking what might happen. In other words, all of our symptoms are really ultimately attempts to not feel some of that pain. So what good counseling does, what good therapy does, what good one-on-one does, is it walks into pain with someone in a way that helps them be able to survive it. It builds calluses, it builds muscles, it builds the ability to look at pain, and then you don't need the symptoms anymore. I'm going to bring this theme up over and over today if you're not getting it. It's why, quote, therapy works. Let me give you a sense of 3 places you can be with someone who is in pain, just to give you a grid. When someone says, I'm really hurting, or I have too much homework, or my parent just died, whatever the level of pain, there's 3 places we can be. One is we can blow it off. The other is we can try to fix it. And the other I call with. Now, blow off means your child says, I have too much homework. And you go, well, get over it. You're just lucky we're paying for education for you. Or blow off is, it's really okay, just go get it done and it'll be all right. Or blow off is, we don't want to hear any more complaining out of you. Or blow off is, boys don't cry, you need to just suck it up. This is when your spouse says, I'm really sad because I wish we'd gone on an anniversary trip. And you go, oh gosh, we went on an anniversary trip last year. Okay? This is where I don't want to hear it. Now the other option that we often run to is to fix it. And this is, at least with Southern parents, this is the real favorite. This is where the child comes home and says, everybody got invited to a spend the night party except for me. And you say, well, baby, you know what? We're just going to pack everybody up and go to New Orleans for the weekend. We'll show those children what a good time is. And I'm just going to kind of swoop in there and we're just going to, nobody's going to mess with my baby. Okay? And you get this race of entitled children who feel like when I feel bad, you're supposed to drop everything and we're going to you buy me a Sony PlayStation because I made a bad grade or I didn't make the baseball team. Now the marriage version of this is how is usually what husbands do. The wife says, I'm so mad because, my friend so-and-so, she said so-and-so and so-and-so to me. And what do we husbands say? We're like, well, why don't you take up jogging? It's like we're going to fix it in some way. Or we're like, hand me that phone. I'll tell her where she can put her carpool. It's like we're going to fix it in some way. Now, ironically, husbands are the worst about fixing it for their wives. Wives/mothers are the worst about fixing it for their children. Those same mothers who are like, why do you keep fixing everything? Why can't you just hear me? Their child then says something and the mother doesn't hear them, the mother fixes it. Okay? Now, Where should we be? And this is sad, but it's true, and it's life-giving. Where should we be when someone is in pain? This is going to overlap all of the work you do with other people, and I want you to get this in your noggin. Because there's something in us as counselors, we mentioned this yesterday to somebody, as people who are in ministry, we want to fix. You know, Tony Stark wants to put on the Iron Man suit and like go save somebody. That's the point. It's really sad to run up against the situations that we can't fix. And actually, once you realize that trying to fix misses the person's heart, because for them, it ain't that easy. What they need is with. With is God's favorite preposition. Go do a word study. I mean, he's constantly saying, I will be with you. He doesn't say, yeah, you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm going to come in and like, you know, with a white horse and rescue you. It's like, I'll be with you. Like when they're like killing you, I'll be with you. And what does Emmanuel mean? God with us. And what's the promise of the covenant? I will be your God, you'll be my people, I will dwell among you, I'll be with you. He loves this word. Why? With is connection. We're going to get to that in a second when we talk about how growth takes place. But there's something magical that I don't understand, that if you're in pain and that pain is met with another person who can sit with you in it and go, oh my gosh, that must have hurt so much. That must have felt like you were the only person in the room who felt that way. And they go, yeah. Getting it like that is a form of with. And that's something about that metabolizes pain. Okay? So you want to make sense of how to deal with good and bad, how to deal with suffering. And this applies to children, to the adolescents you work with, to your marriage, to your friends. That is, if we can learn to sit with the tension of, I don't need to fix this right away. I just want to be with you in a loving way. Half the battle of growth, it takes place on its own. God made us in such a way where if you are with me in pain, something about that pain becomes more manageable and starts to metabolize. Okay? So, in regard to dealing with suffering, the goal is not to prevent it. The goal is not to be afraid of it. It's not going to kill people. What kills people is suffering alone. Pain hurts. Pain alone is hell. But if you face life well, you will be a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Okay? That's not just Bible talk. That is sadness and grief, which is what is true about the universe. And if you feel sadness and grief in the context of love, you're dealing with reality. Okay? You're not dealing with substances or defenses or control or worry or pornography or whatever it is you're into to not face how things are sad. Okay? More on that later. Question about that or anything before I move on beyond? Like I say, we'll come back. Yes, sir.
What if it's self-induced pain? Like they do something that brings, a sin issue that they've been involved in, like a drug abuse thing, whatever the case is. If it's self-induced pain, is there a difference with that, or is it still the same thing?
Great distinction. I am talking about what we call good, true pain, the pain of the universe. All right. Someone comes to you with self-induced pain, i.e., I've been making lots of destructive choices and now there's hell to pay. Say a little more about what to do with that. What do you think they're asking for when they say that?
As in, how do I cope with how do I make my sin bearable almost? Or I don't know. I don't even know how to word it.
That'd be a fun question to try to answer. How do I make my sin bearable? How do I sin and not have destructive consequences in the universe, Doc? You're smart. Well, yeah, I've figured that one out. This is the kind of stuff I want us to get into today, and I'll jump into this one a little bit. All right, I think that someone comes to you and they're starting to reap some of the consequences of their sin. Remember I told y'all yesterday, sin has consequences. It's one of God's little gifts. And it's sort of like sin will hurt you before it kills you. You start to get sick before you die. And people come in and go, I've been living XYZ way and it's starting to hurt me. I still want to lead with a lot of compassion and a lot of understanding. But we're going to talk a little bit about how to make sense of telling somebody the truth. I want to start introducing them to just this concept you brought. It sounds like, so what you're telling me is, since you've been involved sexually with your girlfriend, now you're burdened with so much shame, and you feel like you can't look your parents in the eye, or not, you're worried she's pregnant, or there's this sort of like backfire coming up. A, I want to help you walk through what pain that is. B, do you feel like that pain is telling you anything? What sort of effect do you think that pain might have on your choices? It's like, I don't make up the news, I just report it. But if you step off a 10-story building, it's like, it's okay for about the first 1.72 seconds, and then it becomes really unfun. And so you're making choices that create consequences, and part of being a young person and part of becoming an older person means starting to look at those consequences in a wisdom way and going, what is it that I really want? Because it sounds like and you sort of take this role of being like a mirror who steps back and goes, there's a piece of spinach on your tooth. Do you want to leave it there or not? And then you're not in a shamey position where you're going, well, you reap what you sow, man. But you are in a loving, truth-telling position that says, here's reality. God has given you the gift of this. The worst thing God can do for us is not let us face the consequences of our sins. He who spoils that rod hates his child. And God is coming in and saying, here's some of the effects of this. Now, these are just sort of like, shots across the bow. What would it be like for you to make different choices with girlfriend? And the guy might go, I don't know. We keep saying, man, we're going to make different choices. And then we get home from the date, and we got FaceTime on the couch, and pretty soon it's out of control. And now you really got him talking, and you're in that world with him. Okay? That's a great question, though. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, as you're trying to walk with someone through the midst of all this, like how much of the kind of backstory do you need to kind of have in dealing with things, and like, do you kind of press, or do you just kind of let them reveal whatever, or do you just kind of ask them questions until they just kind of let you in?
That's a good question, and it's a nuanced answer. So let me give you a simple answer so the compulsive part of me can finish this, and when we get back to dealing with more actual one-on-one, I'll try to address it in more detail. It is interesting to me, and I never know which way it's going to go, but some people come in, they sit down, they start telling me about their past. And after a session or two of that, I start going, I don't even know who you are in the present. All you're talking about is your past. And so people come in and all they talk about is the present, and they talk about how they have all this anxiety, and I realize, I don't know anything about where this person learned anything in their relationships. And it seems like there's always a blind spot in the present or the past. I find the past to be relevant just because it's kind of like having some of the answers in the back of the book. I want to know how this person was related to historically, because that's going to set patterns for what they do in these areas. I don't want to find out what your mom and dad did and blame it all on them. But if you were from a family who never spoke around the dinner table, and when you said, oh my gosh, can I tell you what went on with me at school today? Somebody said, no, I don't want to hear it. Then there's something about attachment that you learned. And that's kind of helpful to me to know that. Not so we can go, well, you just really write your dad a mean letter and tell him, how you really feel. But because I want to go, that's where you're coming from. So I want to sort of let what they're doing with me right now, how they're living their life right now, and maybe some issues from history kind of start to inform each other. There's a little bit of a dance there. I certainly am not one of those people who says, well, let's begin by taking a thorough history. Tell me about when you were born in first grade, and what's your first memory, and all that's ancillary. The goal is to figure this out. And if somebody comes in and says, I'm just racked with shame, I don't even want to tell you why I'm here, then I don't care what the mom and dad did. I want to say, well, what do you need to know from me to feel safe believing that I won't shame you? I'm the person in the room now. Here's the new relationship, and they've already started talking about it. I love that. I don't care about the mom and daddy at that point. All right, so which brings us to the issue of shame. How do you deal with a teenager and shame? Because they feel tons of shame. Let's take the example I just said. Somebody says, I don't even want to tell you why I'm here. What does that kid need to hear? What does that kid need from you?
This is a safe place.
Good. How can you not just say that to them, but show that to them?
Listen to them, and actually listen also. Keep calm, don't overreact, don't show shock.
Not showing shock. Put that one down. That's a good one.
How about honor their request to not push farther and just let them warm up to...
Yeah, cool. Exactly. In other words, you were saying to them, like were you here yesterday? Okay. We were talking about this yesterday. It's like my willingness to basically say, my agenda is the healer, is to really get to the nitty gritty and help you grow. And if you're not ready to talk about that yet, I'm willing to put that aside for your sake, because you're not ready to go there. Now, what that says to that kid is, wow, like you care about me. You're not caring about getting to the nitty gritty or let's get to counseling. You're caring about my heart enough to change our agenda. Wow, that's great. So basically, unfortunately, the place where we learn most about whether it is okay for me to mess up, the place where we learn most about is it okay for me to be fallen, or for me to be stupid, or for me to be unattractive, or for me to make mistakes, is not in what people tell us, but again, in how people responded to us. Like, you can tell your child all day long, hey, it's okay to mess up, but children are always watching their parents. How do those people make sense of when things go wrong in life? Wrong with me or wrong with other things? Like, kids notice, it's like you're on a vacation and the condo loses your reservation and dad goes off and he's like yelling and screaming at the desk girl. Kids are like watching that going, okay, so that's kind of what happens if you make mistakes. I'm starting to get it now. All right, and they sort of experience this sense of what happens. Now, the best thing you can do for that child is to be showing them experientially that what they'll receive from you will not be shame. In other words, we need to give them a new experience. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, an experience is worth 1,000 pictures. And the way in which somebody, it's like Trey saying, if I can come to you and say, I've never told anybody this, but I was abused as a child. And you look at me with compassion and a heart of kindness in your eyes, something in me is challenged by that. Because I was kind of expecting that you'd think I was gross now, or you would want to be away from me, or you would not like me or something. But I see in your eyes that you are moved, you care. And that changes me. Shame is changed when it encounters love. So huge piece of what adolescents need in their life, in this part, they have so much shame about so many things. They need people in their life who show them that their badness is not bigger than love. All right, authority, agency issues, and we'll wrap up the 4 food groups with kids. Teenagers need to be exercising their ability to be over. They need to start looking for the places where they're in charge of their life. I want a teenager seriously in charge of their schoolwork. I tell parents, treat teenagers like kites. In other words, look for the opportunities for them to go out on their own and try it out. As I said yesterday, if the first place that they're making choices on their own is college, those choices will be bad ones. So, I tell parents, look for the opportunities for kids to take risks. Look for the opportunities for them to go out on their own. The kid I worry about here, though, is the teenage kid, the one in your youth group, who doesn't want to grow up. One of the things that teenagers need to be developing is a sense of agency and independence and like authority to step out on my own. But there's that kid, there's always that kid. And it's like his friends are like, grooving to the new Timberlake album and he wants to go home and play Legos. You know what I mean? Now, what do you do with that kind of child who's not wanting to get out and be aggressive? What might be going on for that child? What might they need?
Is it potentially just still an attachment to a time in life when things were easy.
Okay, well, I think,
As a child,
Yeah.
I was always loved. If I start making decisions and screw up, maybe that love is going to be broken.
okay, good. All right, nobody, one of the things I tell parents who have terrible toddlers is it's a compliment to you, because nobody can be that much of a twit unless they really believe they're loved. Okay? In other words, some of the worst toddlers are kids who like, okay, check mark. I know I'm loved. Got the attachment thing down. So now I can be a complete hellion, and I know, and what I want to say to them is, of course you can be a complete hellion and be loved. You'll be loved from time out in the other end of the house, but you'll be loved. You'll pass your food under the door, It'll be served with love. So one question is, the only way I can branch out and be independent is if I know I have home base. Great, so attachment's an issue. I want to wonder, does this kid feel attached and loved? Can they hold on to it? So love is one part of it. Limits is always the other part. Remember we were talking about love and limits yesterday? What else might this child need? Okay, yeah. Assurance and empowerment. I hate to use that word, that sounds so Dr. Phil, but what empowerment is when it's like a teenage boy or a toddler boy. I was talking to a toddler boy yesterday and was talking to him about this. He was contemplating taking a risk. And I said, when we take risks, it's scary. And being scared is always part of going out and doing things. But that's the only way you land the big fish, is to go out and take a risk. And you might get shot down in flames, but you take a shot. And a lot of times that more Lego kid,
Okay. I'm just worried about the date. Not like worried, like anxiety. I have a narcissistic thing. I want every one of my words to be captured.
Switch to this. Let me fix this real quick.
all right. Oh yeah. Okay. So that kid. Sometimes kids need us to really be sensitive and aware of their tender feelings and their vulnerabilities. And I know you're scared, and I really care, and I love you. Sometimes kids need us to help them really see and nurture their weak, small parts. Sometimes kids need us to really nurture and help them become aware of their strong parts. I have a little saying that is that children get their view of themselves from the eyes of their parents. And when a child is facing a challenge, I want my eyes to be going like, yeah, you got it. But so much of our culture, the parents are like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And these kids look in their parents' eyes and they see fear, like, you don't think I can handle this? And the child goes, oh my gosh, maybe I know how to handle this. And in our culture, the parents get more worked up about the children's failure than the children do, which now the child has two problems. I didn't get cheerleader, and when I tell mom, she's going to go freak out. So that's why oftentimes teenagers won't talk to their parents, because now they've moved from one problem to two. Mom's going nuts and calling all the friends, and I didn't get cheerleader. I always tell parents, you are not allowed to feel any more than X minus 1 as upset as your teenager is, okay? X being the integer that defines how upset your teenager is. You can't feel more than X minus 1. You have to be less of whatever it is they're feeling, because their feelings need to exist, and you need to, in a sense, be saying, yeah, this is hard, but you can do this. What they need us to say is, with some kids, the Lego kid needs us to be saying, you're wanting to kind of step back here and help me serve refreshments at youth group instead of getting out there and playing foosball. Why don't you get out there? Get out there and jump in there. Take a shot. Come back and tell me how it went. And sort of be an advocate who's helping push them out and help them believe that they're strong. So one of the things we need is that sense of being over. A lot of teenagers are going to take that take it downtown, but be aware of those who might tend to be more withdrawn and passive. All right, what about submission? Why do teenagers hate to submit? Why does anybody hate to submit?
Control.
Okay? How do we lose control and submission?
We don't get to make the choice.
In other words, I hate submission because instead of me getting to make the rules, I have to submit to you. Good, okay. Emotionally speaking, why is submission difficult, aside from that?
It feels like humiliation.
Yes. Secret of the universe is this. The danger of submission is it feels like you win and I lose. I had a teenage boy tell me not long ago, he said, when my parents say, because I said so, what that means is basically I win and you lose because I'm the parent and you're the child. And it felt humiliating. It felt like I'm a dumb loser, you win. Okay? Did you have a question?
What about over submissive, like teenagers who are just super submissive?
Like a teenage kid who's super submissive?
Super submissive.
That would fall under like Lego kid. That's like all they do is do what's right. They don't want to upset anybody. I would talk to your friends next to you about the attachment issue. In other words, a compliant child is one who's saying, I'll sell me down the river so you'll be happy with me. Because what I want is love. Okay? Key problem of the universe in a sense is, do I be me or do I be loved? Now, if I do exactly what you want me to be, then you're all going to love me. But I lose me. But if I'm me, some of you aren't going to like me. So what do I do? So we all had this problem. So a lot of times kids will solve it by coming super little compliance. And like we said yesterday, compliant makes like, walking through authority structures easy for them, but they never really grow up. Like I asked yesterday, how are the compliant people doing in life, So with a compliant kid, I want to start like teasing them. I hear me. You did it. Good job. Thank you. I want to start teasing them and going, you know what? It's Friday. Sometime between now and next Friday, I want you to do something like out of the box. Come back and tell me about it. Like spill milk and not clean it up. I mean, just go for it, man, And I want to almost do play therapy with this kid and start teasing them and saying, and what they'll do is they'll kind of nod sheepishly like, yeah, you got me. I am a little compliant one. And I go, well, what would it be like to be bad? What would it be like to have somebody mad at you? And start getting them to unpack that, because that's all coming out of fear. Nobody wants to be compliant. They only do it because they're afraid. So I want to address the fear, and I want to empower them, like with this one. All right. Dealing with submission. Our culture, it's like, I hear so many parents talk about like their 2-year-old who just has this strong little will, and by golly, they just won't submit, Like, here's this 2-year-old walking around with this incredibly sophisticated spiritual ability to bend the knee. And by golly, they're just not doing it, The ability to submit is an ability. It's like learning to spell, okay? And you have to be taught it. And the way you teach it is this, is to go back to our authority stoplight, that we're over, we're neither, and we're under, like the centurion. And remember that biblical authority never exists, unless you're Jesus, never exists without her sister, humility. And that is, I am someone who is over you, child, but you know what? I'm under people too. And I know how much that stinks. I get it. I know you're having to do the things I'm saying, and I know that feels terrible and not fair. In other words, empathy, understanding, a sensitivity makes submission tolerable. That's the anesthesia. That's the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down of the shame and embarrassment of having to bend the knee. One time years ago, it was right when Clinton took office first time. My children were little, and I told them to do something, and one of them said, "Oh, that's just so not fair. You just make up rules and we have to do them." And part of me was like, it can learn. Excellent. Next question, But Clinton had just taken office, and my accountant just told me, oh, by the way, as of yesterday, you're paying more taxes. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even vote for him, And I was really kind of chafing under the fact that somebody just got to go make up some rule and take my money. didn't even do anything bad. My kids did something bad, you know? And so I stopped and I said, you know, I tried that on. I said, you know, but you're right. That is really hard. I'm this dad, and I just get to make up rules, and I decide you go to bed earlier. Or I decide you need a bath. Or maybe I decide you didn't need a bath, but I'm making up the rules, and you have to do them. I really get that. That really is hard. Now, what I gave her was the something that can make submission tolerable, because I'm not just the boss and you're the underling. We're both in a chain, and I understand it and I care. All right, so that empathy softens the issue of submission hugely. Teenagers need that a lot, because most of the teenagers who chafe against authority are the ones who have parents who really enjoy being the authority and demand it. And as Jesus said, lord it over them. All right, that is kind of an overview of how the 4 food groups work with teenagers. I'm not ready for a break yet, are y'all? You okay? Yes, sir?
I have a question. So maybe this is the next step, but I can't imagine that we're all in just one box, right? So you're having multiple boxes, I would think, at times going on.
Oh, in the 4 food groups?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have a favorite, kind of like you tend to start to, lead with your left foot. But, everybody will recognize one of these they struggle with. Those of us who've had a little therapy recognize 4 of these we struggle with. Those of us who are married recognize 4 of these we struggle with. Yeah. But there'll be an inclination. There'll be a tendency. Like mine is, I have attachment injuries. So, I tend to be emotionally sensitive anyway. I can walk in anywhere and say yes, no, or hey, this is me. The issue is you get really close to me and the attachment issue becomes vulnerable, I can start to feel that. All right? So I have that awareness. Now, I do have some boundary issues. I grow there. Some shame issues. I connect with attachment issues. But what I need to be aware of when I struggle is this one. Okay? Just learn to be aware of which it is. And most of the people you talk about will have one that's kind of their weakest little link. That's kind of why the grid is, how to apply the grid. Yes, sir?
I just wonder if attachment is, in a sense, more basic or the most basic.
Yes.
And therefore, I could trace some attachment through boundaries.
Yes.
And see how it affects all of it.
Yes.
So, because I'm needy, my boundaries are very poor.
Yes.
And then because I feel ashamed because I'm not loved.
Yes.
And therefore don't know how to exercise good agency, and are really immature, so I'll go over and then under and over and under, that kind of thing.
My work here is complete. You may go back to Tupelo now. Exactly. In other words, think biblically too. Love. Somebody asked Jesus what are the most important things. He said, well, there's 2 of them. Love and love. Okay? So that connected piece, everything about us orients around that. When God said that it's not good for the man to be alone, He wasn't just creating marriage. He was creating a fundamental principle of the universe, and that is, for some reason, I don't understand, God decided that we needed relationship with Him and relationship with other people. And that relational connection thing, that naked and not ashamed thing. Do you realize that if we were still naked and not ashamed, that's what it is. Naked and not ashamed means you fully know me and you dig it. Okay? Now, you lose that and everything else, just as you said, is a cascade. Everything else starts to fall apart. You lose that, you start making clothing out of fig leaves. You lose that, you start blaming your wife. And she blames the snake. The snake doesn't blame anybody, but who cares? All these things start to happen. Which, to the whole issue of how we grow.
Can I share it's a toddler story.
Yeah, Hillary, go ahead.
But about how...
Here you go.
Oh.
You got to speak in the microphone.
Oh, man. About how empathy really does make submission tolerable.
How what?
Empathy does make submission tolerable. I just
Okay,
wanted
good.
to,
Yeah, tell.
he's 4, and he was exhausted. I was telling him, you've got to take a nap before you can watch your show. He was begging to watch a TV show. And I was just telling him, nope, we got to take a nap first. And he started saying something. I couldn't understand him at first. But then I realized he was saying, Mom, you need to say, I know that you really want to watch the TV show, but we have to take a nap first. And I said, oh, okay. And so I said that to him, and he hugged me and said, okay, Mommy. I about
Oh my
melted.
gosh.
Because I've tried to done that. I've tried to say,
Right.
oh, I know you really want this,
Yeah.
And he reminded me when I forgot.
That's so beautiful.
It was precious. But anyway, I was just sharing.
That's beautiful. Next thing you know, he'll be going, can't you parent with love and limits? What a great template for him for his marriage. His wife can say, oh, I just feel like we just never seem to have enough money. And instead of going, well, fine, why don't you get a job? He'll say, could you also say you really appreciate how hard I work? And that it's hard that we don't have money? Because I really do work hard. I mean, if we could talk to adults like that. All right. Let's talk about one-on-ones. Let's talk about counseling. Stacy Croft told me that he talked about one-on-ones to y'all. Who heard that? Okay. I'm staying with him. And I should have asked him about it last night. Instead, we watched Sherlock. But yeah, that's why I wore my long black coat today. It's like I should have asked him what he told y'all. So you tell me if I'm disagreeing with any of Stacy Croft's basic principles, and we'll work it out. All right. Let's start with let's get started. The first thing you have to have in order to do one-on-one to work with somebody, we've already touched on all of these things. I'm going to try to touch them in a more structured way. Is safety. Now that it's not safe to be naked and not ashamed anymore, we all have this problem. Is it safe? One of the saddest moments to me, though it's a glorious moment of redemption, in that story of the fall, is that passage where it says that God made clothing of animal skins to clothe Adam and his wife. And that makes you just go, oh. I mean, what is that saying? Naked, not ashamed isn't safe anymore. Now Adam and Eve come up with these lame solutions of fig leaves, and God's message to them in a sense is, yeah, you're right. You do need to be covered now. It's not safe anymore. In fact, let me make you better clothes, which is an unbelievable act of grace. They've sinned against him, and instead of snatching those fig leaves off and going, oh, no, you don't. You're full of shame now, and you're going to bear your shame exposed. He clothes them with the skin of someone else who had to die in order to clothe them. In the Garden of Eden, there was already shedding of blood to cover our shame. So, how do we create safety? I helped start a small group ministry at a church in Atlanta a few years back. And when I started talking to them about having small groups and people opening up in small groups, what do you think the number one concern was of everyone in the small group? Safety from what? Hand motion. We got a hand motion in front. I don't know how many of y'all are from the South, but I know in the South this is something we like to do. And I'm not going to tell you anything about me because it's going to be all over the country club swimming pool this time tomorrow. Carpool line's going to be talking about it. In other words, first piece of safety is confidentiality. What's the first rule of Fight Club? What's the second rule of Fight Club? Okay, you're talking about it though. Don't want to hear you talking about it again. Anyway, why is gossip bad? Why is it that I love those passages in the New Testament where Paul's like, and don't ye be murderers and slanderers and adulterers and fornicators and those who follow the evil one and gossips and liars. And it's like gossip is like slumped over here with like nuclear terrorism. Why is that? You think gossip is like ladies in a sewing circle, but it's slumped over here in these big meaty sins. Why is that? Yes, sir.
It's just destructive.
How is it destructive?
Because it can eat away people.
If gossip exists in my culture, what's going to happen?
Erodes the trust.
Trust, because I won't. Oh, I'm glad I asked this. All right, let's start at the beginning. There is only one place in the universe where my heart can grow, and that is when it's known by another person. I don't know why God did that. I guess God could have made it to where if we just went off and prayed to God, our problems would go away, but He made it to where His grace is manifested both directly and indirectly. Theologians call it the mediate and the immediate revelation of God. We are stewards of the manifold grace of God. I bring His grace to you like a waiter. He made us to where if you have secrets in your life that no other human knows about, you will not grow there. Okay? The one place you will never, ever, ever, ever grow is alone. That's why we have fellowship. That's why we have the body of Christ. That's why we created a context like one-on-one in which we can tell the truth. Because only when the truth comes out, only when you're known by another person, only when your secret or only when your pain is told and shared with another person who has skin on, does it get better. Now, what's never, ever, ever, ever going to happen if I think my secret, my sin, my brokenness is going to be shared abroad by your gossip if I tell you the truth about me? What's never going to happen? I will never tell you anything. So I will never grow. The secrets will stay secret. Why? Because of gossip. Gossip is an element that completely halts the chemical reaction of growth. Growth stops because there's too much shame. I'm not going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to tell you anything. Okay? I shut down, I'm alone, I'm in secret, and I will never, ever, 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 ever grow there. Okay? So that's why Paul says, whoa, this one's a biggie. This shuts down the very sanctification of the church. It's so destructive. Yes?
And I think there's also an element, the third commandment is, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That God cares for His name, He guards His name. And then Proverbs says a good name is better than precious jewels.
Yeah.
That there's part of being made in God's image, that having a good name, a good reputation, being honorable, is reflecting the image of God. Gossip undercuts
Good.
that aspect of being made in the image of God in community, like you're saying.
Cool. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, so first step is letting this kid know you will keep them in confidence. Now, with teenagers, there's some limitations to that. I tell my teens, I want to be interacting with your parents. I want to be an advocate for you with your parents. And that means that I want to be able to talk to them about themes we are talking about. Not want to talk to them about details, but I want to talk to them about themes. And I like to tell up front a teenager is, I want to be able to say, hey, he's dealing with some depression or there's some anxiety. Or I will even say, can I talk to your parents about this thing that you get afraid of your dad when he gets so angry? And they're like, no, don't say that yet. And then a few sessions later, they'll say, yeah, you can talk about it. But I want to be in dialogue with them about what I'll say to parents. Of course, there are the limitations that we all have about people, about a danger to self or others. When we have to refer, for instance, those kind of limitations. I like to be really open with teenagers about that. But otherwise, I want to be able to say, what you bring in here and what you tell me in your heart, I will keep in confidence, as long as it's not something that's ultimately dangerous to you, or not something that we can't use you and me deciding together to tell your parents to help the situation get better. Which reminds me, I want to talk about when y'all refer. I believe that people in ministry are the only profession that I know of that aren't directly, overtly taught about how to refer. You think about that? I mean, one of the things I learned in school was when it's out of your league, John, when it gets to this, refer, you know. Y'all aren't really taught that. And ministry is an interesting position because, you know, you have this massive responsibility, but you don't have the kind of boundaries I have if you're in ministry. It's like if you called me on a Saturday and said, you know, hey, I've been checked into the hospital. I got suicidal and got put in the hospital. I'd go, okay, cool, I'll come by and see you on Monday. If you're in ministry and somebody says, I'm in the hospital, you got to like drop everything and go see them in the hospital. You know, there's a lot of loss of power and freedom that other professions have. You know, a physician could say, well, I'm not on call this weekend. Ministry doesn't have that. I mean, there's a lot that is asked of y'all. And you put you in a situation where there's a session and then there are all these people in your church and you're in a sense like running a corporation, but all of the people who buy your product and the board of directors get to like not like you if you make decisions that they don't like. You know, there's this constant sort of like judgment and evaluation of you're going to please some people and displease other people all the time, and there's that pressure on. And I just feel like there's a lot expected out of y'all in ministry. It's an unusual role. But one of the things that it creates is a situation where I don't think y'all are taught a lot about how to refer and when to refer. And I want to really encourage you to do that. Later on, I really hope we can talk about some of the more gnarly kind of things, like somebody who's really depressed or you know, pornography abuse, you know, addiction, eating disorders. These are things I don't want you to have to attempt to do. That's not what you're trained to do. That's what you need to send to people like me. And I want you to be looking out for that. You don't need to be a hero. Call in a therapist. Now, one of the things you'll experience is if you're working with teens, parents will resist that. Parents don't want to go to a therapist, and they'll come up with all sorts of reasons why they can't go to a therapist. And they will sort of expect that you do this work. And number one, I would lovingly parent them and say, I really understand that that's what you think. This is my best judgment, and this is what I believe needs to happen. I would call in other staff for that too. Parents love to, especially when it comes to teenagers, I don't know why this is, but the same couple can be really delightful to work with in marital therapy, but when you work with them regarding their teenage kid, they make me crazy. Teenage parents make me crazy. I don't know why it is. And they will put us in positions that are impossible. They do that to me all the time. They'll say, you know, our child's suicidal. And I'm like, okay, well, let's start working. I want to see him on Tuesday. I want to see all three of y'all on Thursday. And they're like, oh, well, actually, we're going to Cabo on Thursday. And it's like, wait, he's suicidal, you know? And so, well, actually, Thursday, he's got soccer. And it's like, really? Okay? And or like, well, we really can't afford to come every week. We can come once a month. And I'm like, okay, he's suicidal, and you can't get off work, or you can only come once a month, and you want me to fix this. And I'm pretty overt with the parents about that. Like, basically, I'll say, you're in essence giving me a pair of scissors, and you're asking me to cut your yard. And in an hour, when I've only cut like 1 square foot of your yard, don't be disappointed. In other words, these parents act like this. It's why the kid's crazy. All right? So I want you to have a sense of authority in your own profession to speak very honestly with these parents. Parents love to push around people in ministry. They will treat you like the help, okay, and expect impossible things out of you and say, well, we don't believe in counseling. We want you to do it. Or we just really can't afford that. Or we don't know anybody in the area. And I would say, well, I tell you what, push comes to shove, I will continue to work with your child. I will continue to do what I can with your child, but I need you to know that in my opinion, as a professional and as a minister, this is what needs to happen. I would be very, very frank, non-shaming, but tell them the truth about that.
You're saying being frank and being overt with the parents. I'm wondering how honest or how open about, like you use the word like to a teenager, like I want to be an advocate for you.
Yes.
Or I want this to. How honest should we be with them, or should we be more covert with them? Like being open and frank with the parents, but with the teenagers, I'm just trying to think of like, I feel like that would be really intimidating for me to come to a student in a conversation and something comes up to me and be like, I really want to be an advocate for you. They might be like, I don't get what you're saying. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, Is my question making sense?
Not quite yet, but it's getting there.
I'm just wondering, like, how open and honest about our methods and about these boundaries and the 4 food groups should we be when we are speaking to our students? Should we be like, that sounds like an attachment issue? Or, I mean, that's obviously probably a little bit gross of an overstatement, but as we're interacting with them, do you think it's wise for us to be very clear about where we're going, or should we be more covert all the time and just clear with the parents? No.
Yeah, okay, let me take a shot at it. Everybody's different, but an issue with the parents, I like to talk very frankly with the child and say, let's say, do you remember, wasn't I talking yesterday about the young fellow who had all the anxiety and his mom controls everything and runs the world? I told him that. I said, I feel like that it's hard for you to feel like you can win anything because your mom always wins everything. I said, I really want to try to intervene with that. I do think that you should have consequences in your life when you choose irresponsibly. I think your parents are onto something in terms of like discipline with you. That's cool. That's part of life. We're not going to like rescue you from these mean parents, but I get where you're going. Now, what I'd like to do is to talk to your mom and talk to your dad in this regard and do this. And if you will like teach me sort of what you're experiencing at home, I'll try to be an advocate for that with your parents. I'll tell them that much. Because it gets into kind of family therapy. Like I'm going to be talking, and I'll tell the parents just as frankly. He's telling me things he won't tell y'all, and so I'm going to kind of be an intermediary for a little bit. As I learn things, I want to inform y'all. Now, y'all aren't in trouble. This is not like, this is really your bad parents, because that's where all of them will go, is you're saying we're bad parents. I like to say it's sort of like, we got a treatment team going here. I'm the head of the treatment team and y'all are part of my treatment team. Now, I can either see your child every day for 50 minutes and it costs you a fortune, or I can teach you to do what I'm learning, and I can become the guy in the press box with the headset calling the plays, but y'all are 24/7 with this kid. Y'all start doing the things I'm learning and I get you out of here in a month. And the parents are like, okay, we're up for that. And I said, so are you cool with me coaching you? Like, I'm going to be sort of watching what you're doing and saying, if you put a little more top spin on your forehand, it's going to go over the net and you can kind of have a lot more speed on it. And that's not a criticism, but I can coach you. And sort of get them to buy into the whole system rather than like, well, if you keep shaming him like that, he is going to act out, but kind of an advocacy with the parents too. I'm very open about that and very hands-on in terms of like, let me help restructure y'all's family in this.
So you would say that being open and honest with what you're trying to do with the student as well as with the parents, like telling them, this is what I see, I'm going to be open and honest. That's okay.
Yeah, exceptions to that are you get a really defensive parent. Like you have parents where you say, well, one of the things I think he's experiencing is it seems like when he needs consequences, sometimes he can feel like y'all get really angry, and you have a parent go, that is absolutely ridiculous, and you sort of feel them bristle. I start to be a little more careful with that person, and because they're already feeling so much shame. If you come with them too much information, they'll flood with it. So I'll adjust myself to that, but I want to be open about where I'm going otherwise. Yeah. Yes.
I got a question. All right. So we tell our youth that it's a safe environment and confidentiality of stuff. And then you start to get to the point where they're opening up, getting into some deep stuff, and now we're to the point where we got to refer. So now I've got to go, how do you handle that with the person? Because they're starting to open up, you're making some headway, and then all of a sudden you get too deep and you find out this information that really needs to go higher than what I can handle.
Yeah.
How do you do that without taking a big stride backwards because you've already made forward progress?
Well, I think that all of y'all in ministry, you are not therapists. I mean, all I do 24/7 is therapy. That's what I do. That's not what y'all do. I think, there's some models out there for pastoral counseling, and a lot of them begin with a structure. In other words, one of the things I would say to people you see is, One of the things I know I do is I want to meet with X or Y number of times with you to sort of address whatever's going on with you. Beyond that, I will walk at your side and we can go other directions, or I might need to let somebody else with you. You can let them know ahead of time. If you're in youth ministry and you're just hanging out with these kids until they go off to college, then I think what you should say is that this isn't a abandonment of them, but sort of okay, you've confided in me really precious, important things. I'm not leaving you. I got your back. I'll walk with you through this. What I'm thinking, though, is you have an eating disorder. And I want you to have somebody who really knows what they're doing who can help you. And I tell you what, after you see them, let's you and me grab lunch, or you come back over here to the church and talk to me, and I want you to tell me everything you heard and what you're learning, and I'm still with you in it. And it's like if you come to me with a cut on your hand, I'll give you a Band-Aid. You come to me and your brachial artery is severed, I'm not doing you any favors by giving you a Band-Aid. I want to take you to the emergency room, okay? I want to get you where you can really get some help. And if you have a child who's open to that, that's not going to feel like a step back or an abandonment. So you can, as you think about your ministry in general, you can think about structuring how much counseling you want to do anyway. You don't want to sign up to be a long-term therapist for people. On the other hand, though you probably will be in the lives of young people over a season, I don't think it negates y'all's connection or that safety to refer them. Now, on what conditions should you refer? Danger to self and others, obviously. Refer regarding suicidal intent for the sake of their safety. But I will tell you this. With teenagers, teenagers are more dangerous for suicide because there's a breach between teenagers' emotional impulse and their ability to choose. In other words, there's actually MRI study that shows that connection between me feeling like doing something and me doing it is severed for teenagers. Like it doesn't all the way developed yet. That mediating cognition that adults have that say, no, I really want to do that? Is that really a good idea? Maybe that's not the best idea. That isn't really that present in teenagers. So oftentimes they can get in a bad place and impulsively do something. That's why you hear about these sudden, rash of teenage suicides, because they can do that. So you got to stay kind of frosty with that, because sometimes they can act out in unexpected ways. But also remember that a lot of the times teenagers say things like, I just wish I was dead, because they don't know any other way to express the depth of how much they're hurting. In other words, if I had to come up with a word to express to you how bad I'm hurting, I can't find it. I can't say, I feel such overwhelming despair. I don't know those words. So I'm going to tell you an action that would signify how bad I hurt. I wish I was just dead. And one of the questions I'll ask people, teenager or not, is, some people talk about dying, and it means they just really want to die. Like they want to be dead. And some people say they wish they were dead because they're in so much pain that they can't imagine that life will ever get better here. And it seems like the only way they could ever get any relief from that pain would be for them to die. And I swear 80% of the people I say that to go, yeah, that's it. In other words, we hadn't called the cops, we hadn't made a big scene, this person's not suicidal. They're saying, I am in so much pain that the best way I could express how badly I feel is to say, I just wish I was dead. And sometimes all it takes in someone's life who is feeling that suicidal is to have someone who gets it, someone who cares about them and walks into that world with them and can say, I totally get how you could be feeling that horrible. It's that hopeless. Like the only thing that could ever make it better is for you to die, for you just to go to heaven. And they go, oh my gosh, you get that? And all of a sudden this kid's not suicidal anymore, okay? So don't panic at the word suicide. Walk into it emotionally and say, take me in there. Take me with you. What's going on? Then you can ask questions. I want to say, well, have you got a plan? And most people will say, yeah. And I would say, what is it? And they'd say, well, I've got a bottle of pills. And as it starts to get more realistic, then you need to tell someone. But don't jump to that first. You may be missing a really wonderful opportunity to know this person's heart and to really join them in something that feels horrible to them. Danger to self regarding minor damage like cutting. Refer out for that, not because it's necessarily dangerous, but because it's just so complex and nuanced and wacky that it's out of your parlance. Okay, refer that to somebody who really is trained in that. Yes, sir.
Really quick question. How do you find, if it's an area that you're unfamiliar with, like cutting, where you talk to Sue about it, how do you find the one who does know about that? Like, how do you find the person to?
How do you find a network of therapists? All right, one of the things your church needs to do is get busy on that. I spend my time doing that. Like, I have a folder, and I'm always calling, it's like somebody said they wanted a therapist in Mobile. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Well, I do know somebody in Birmingham. And Birmingham people are in Alabama, and so are Mobile people. So maybe the Birmingham, anyway, I have a list ongoing of people. And sometimes, like Nashville had a dearth of therapists back in the 90s. It was really hard to find anybody. And now they're popping up all over the place. I just always keep looking on.
One thing that we're going to be working on is finding good adolescent counselors by area.
That's cool. That's great. All right, another reason you refer, let me finish the referral issue, then we'll take a break and come back and pick back up with how to do one-on-ones. Emotions that are debilitating. Teens tend to be histrionic in their emotions anyway. They tend to have floods of emotion anyway. But when those emotions become debilitating, like you notice that these emotions prevent them from being able to do life well, they don't go to school, they don't study, they're having outbursts that are destructive. Emotions that get debilitating, that's a good sign to refer. And again, picking up on your question, referring doesn't mean it's like, well, look, see you in heaven, it's going to be great. It means I'm not taking a back seat to your growth, but I'm not leaving the position of being your advocate. Substance abuse that has a hold on them. Most teens are going to drink or smoke or do something. Well, not most, but that's not uncommon. Don't panic at that. Sometimes they need somebody to talk to about it. Find out what's in it for them. Some kids drink because they feel like they have to, and they won't have friends if they don't. In other words, potential attachment issue. Now, you were asking front row, you were asking, well, then would I say, well, you're drinking because you have an attachment issue? No, I would say, it sounds like one of the reasons you're drinking is because you feel like you won't have friends if you don't. So how do you make sense of people liking you, not liking you, being accepted, not accepted? Can you be you, real you? And so I'm talking these two issues. I'm not calling them by their name, but I'm listening now. Oh, they're drinking because they want to fit in. Fit in is an attachment issue. Or they're drinking because they're afraid to stand up and be themselves. This may be kind of a boundary issue. And you got the categories going. Now, what we'll look at in a little bit is once you say that, I want to start thinking, how can I help them not have so many attachment needs? And I'm going to say, well, what would it feel like to really be loved? Just for you, whether you drink or not. What would that be like? Get them to think about that. Get them to go inside and try that on. Do they have a category for being loved like that? Do they have a category for being wanted even if they don't do what everybody else wants? I might use myself. I love using myself in my relationship with my people. I'm like, well, you're telling me lots of things about you that are, less than ideal. Do you feel like I still like you? In other words, we start building attachment through relationship. If I'm connected with you and you're connected with me and you're talking to me, and you say you have an attachment problem or you have a fear of people don't like you, do you believe I do? And a lot of them will say, well, that's just kind of your job. And I'm like, well, it's my job. My time's for sale, but my heart's not. You think I like you? And see what they do with being liked at all. And you start getting them talking and thinking about attachment. You get them trying on the risk of believing that you like them. Most people who are so afraid they're not going to be loved, who don't have this capacity, once love hits them, they're terrified of it. This is one of the dilemmas of the universe of being a human. Paul calls it being subjected to futility, that the thing we long for and need the most in the universe is love, and the thing we're most terrified of all the whole universe is love. Okay? And once you get that duality, once you get that dilemma, you'll realize why people need counseling. Because they're doing wacky things because they want to be loved, but then you try to love them and they freak out. And that's where the real work of therapy comes in. Yes?
Functionally, what is that freak out part about being loved? If you describe from your perspective and experience.
Yeah, I think y'all can try it on and probably answer it yourself. Why do people worry? What is worry? Worry is a protective mechanism. Worry is an imaginary what if bad. And if I anticipate that bad things are going to happen, I can live in this protective way all the time. I'm vigilant. Something bad might happen at any moment. Now, that's a hard way to live, and you're really unhappy, but guess what? When the bad things happen, you're prepared for them. All right? Now, if I'm going to give up worry, it's going to be okay. All my defenses are down. I'm not anticipating what might happen. I'm not worrying. And if something bad happens then, I'm caught off guard, it will destroy me. That's what people think. I would rather be vigilant and miserable all the time, but ready, than hope something good and be open and vulnerable and then get devastated. All right? So, in order to stop worrying, we have to learn to be incredibly vulnerable. Now, love is the same way. If I really trust in love, it's one thing if I think you don't like me. I'm like, you don't like me? God, what a jerk. Now, that's not fun, but it's safe. But if I think, you really like me, you've asked me lots of questions, you've talked to me afterwards, you really like me. And later on, I'm walking out and I hear you talking to one of your buddies going, God, I thought that guy would never shut up. All right? Now I'm devastated because I thought you loved me. I thought you liked me. Okay? My heart is broken. All right? So we don't want to accept love because love melts us. Love makes us vulnerable. Love makes us exposed. I want fig leaves, baby. I want animal skins. I want to hide. I want to be a spin doctor. I want to play it safe because we're that vulnerable. So we hate love because it makes us so vulnerable. Substance abuse, we said, under refer. Sexual addiction also fits under this one. Craziness, just to be technical. Refer them if they're crazy. You'll pick up on it. It's somewhat rare, but I have it happen frequently. You'll feel it. It's like delusional thinking. Every once in a while you have it. Teenagers do this from time to time. Schizophrenia actually arrives lots of times during the teenage years. They'll say things like, the song on the radio was singing to me. Or, the preacher was preaching the other day. I think he's been reading my diary. And, you'll hear crazy things like that. When you hear the crazy stuff, refer. Not real common, but certainly present. Sexual abuse, of course, you have to refer for that. That's the law. Can you think of any other reasons to refer? I want you to remember you need to refer. I do all the time. Yes?
Sort of off of the sexual addiction, pornography, especially if you're counseling a teenage guy, at what point do you think it's in the realm of sexual addiction versus he's just struggling with pornography? And, I mean, you can't say just, but you see what I mean?
Right, yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that in detail later, but let me just hit a couple of things. Your question, let me change your question. It's like, I have this teenage kid I'm working with, and he's drinking motor oil. But he doesn't drink too much motor oil. Like, how much motor oil can he drink and it really not be bad for him? Where do you draw that line? Any motor oil is bad for him. Okay, so the issue of pornography is ubiquitous. Everybody is going to see it nowadays in our culture. It creates destructive things in terms of relationships. It creates destructive things in terms of sexuality. It does bad things to people's souls. So just addressing what would it be like to eliminate that from your life anyway would be a question worth really hanging out with. Addiction, nobody's going to come in and say, I am a porn addict. They're going to come in and say, I've been struggling with porn and blah, blah. And I want to ask, well, can you stop? And they'll say, yeah. And I go, well, give it a shot. Tell me how it goes. In other words, I don't know if you're a porn addict. You tell me. You'll tell me about this time next week. If you're not able to say no to it, then you are. And that's not something to be ashamed about because it's something that's got pretty big hooks. And once they get in you need somebody else to help you get the hooks out. With all out of control behaviors, we need two different things. Number one, we need to have that behavior understood. In other words, think about it. Porn's a great example to play with. There's an emotional issue going on there. And one of the things I want to ask is not how long since you last used porn. I want to ask, tell me what it gives you. What's it like? What's your fantasy? What's in it for you? I mean, think about it. In what sense could a porn addiction or a sexual addiction have attachment-related issues?
Well, it's the illusion of acceptance.
Right. Right. In other words, porn fantasy is the sexualization of love means I experience a sexual rush instead of real closeness with real people. So there's loneliness, I feel disconnected, and in sexual fantasy, or the actual drug-addicted component of the endorphin rush from the sexual experience. Actually, porn addiction has a chemical addiction piece to it, because people get habituated to that rush of the endorphin. That substitutes for real love. So I want to start asking this person, I want to start learning about what they do with intimacy and closeness and real relationships and, real girls and real vulnerability. Shame is such a huge piece for sexual addiction, because nothing makes you feel better in your shame than a sexual fantasy, because you are demand. There's this great sense of rush and power, and I'm very accepted or wanted or whatever, and so the shame kind of melts away during that little season of experience. And then after you have the sexual experience, there's a rush of shame back because now you've done it again. Okay? And so now you're flooded with even more shame than you had before. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to fight and fight and fight and fight and struggle against that until you have to go use again, and that makes the shame go away until after you finished using, and then all shame comes back. And there's the shame component for sexual addiction that's really insidious and gets people really stuck. So one of the things I want to look at is, what do they do with shame? Like, what do you do with your badness? What do you do with how shameful this feels to you? And usually people who use porn feel more shame about it than they should. I mean, it's like, okay, so you're one of 10 billion people who struggle with porn. Welcome to the club. Let's talk about it. Let's see what you're needing. Let's see where you're hurting. Let's unpack it. So it could be a boundary issue. Can you say no to your impulses? It could be a boundary issue in the sense of I don't feel safe being real me in real life, which creates lots of depression for people. So I get to have a fantasy in which people want me. Understand what their heart is wanting underneath it as you try to make sense of it. Now, that's part A of understanding and dealing with the sexual addiction. If that's all you did, you would have a very emotionally attuned and insightful porn addict. So with all out of control behaviors, be they sexual addiction or chemical addiction or workaholic, overeating, we also need the other component, love and limits. Any out of control behavior needs a limit. And limits mean I want them to be thinking up consequences or accountability to create a structure in which they can't act out, or in which it'll cost them to act out. I have a couple of people now who are overweight and are trying to stay on their diets, and they'll just blow their diets off. And I'm like, well, why don't you set up something where it costs you practically for you to blow off your diet? In other words, the little parts of us, the emotional parts of us that use porn or that overeat or can't say no to our own impulses are like children that live inside of us. And you can explain to a child all day, you really need to do your homework because one day you're going to want to be a neurosurgeon and you're going to have to know a lot of things. So why don't you go upstairs and study your spelling so you can be a good neurosurgeon one day? And the child's like, okay? That's what it's like to tell our emotional parts, if you use porn, that's really going to be bad for you and it's going to hurt you and blah, blah. Our little parts, our emotional parts inside are like, I don't care. I want to feel good about myself. All right? So those parts need discipline, almost like children. And I've told my overweight people, I'm like, think up something that'll cost you. And they've come up with, one guy had to pay enormous amounts of money to the church every time he cheated on his diet. I think we built our new sanctuary at First Pres because of this guy. But he's looking good. Anyway, what that does is you create this internal world where I'm understood and connected, and John knows me now, and we're working together on the shame thing I'm feeling that drives the porn addiction. And if I use, I don't get any electronics for 3 or 4 days. That means no computer or no TV or no iPod or whatever, and that's, accountable. And I even have friends who are engaged in sort of keeping me accountable to that. That will get people's attention, and you start working with them in that kind of a sense. Let's do one more question, then take a break. Yeah, okay. Yes.
I was just going to make a comment. I think I'm older than most here. And another time, in my opinion, to make a referral and a good practice is to have some accountability is if you've got a kid who is just really dependent and codependent on you and you can't really even identify what it is, but this is not healthy. And I've had friends say, hey, this is out of your league. She needs to go somewhere. She needs some help. And
I love that. Yeah.
I don't know how everybody has their different network of accountability, but in our desire to help and love and fix people, somebody from the outside you should say, hey Claire, you are way out of your league, and because they're calling you or whatever. And I think in the situation of not being the therapist and they're coming once a week to being a person in the church who's very accessible.
Yes.
It's really important to have some accountability with somebody that can call you on that and say, and it may be your spouse, which would be marvelous.
That's huge. That's really good. These
workers, the workers need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
They need to hold each other accountable to kids.
Mm-hmm. Hyperdependency is what they present is I want lots more love, but that's not their problem. They don't need more love. The problem is that their cup has holes in the bottom of it, and you keep pouring love in and it just runs out the bottom. So they always feel empty, so they're always dependent. Now the only way to fill up the holes in the bottom of that cup is to set really strong structure and limits on the relationship, which you cannot do being ministry. By definition. So that's why that often happens. That's so good, and I really thank you for bringing it up. That child, that young person, even that adult sometimes, I've had pastors say, there's, an adult person in the church who's just always out there in their waiting room, every time they come out from their office. That person will never grow if they just stay in that dependent relationship with you, so they need to get out of that. Good one. All right, let's break and just do, let's do 10 minutes. We've been going a long time.